Welcome back to Young and Wifed Up. This is Marcella.
And I'm Gabby.
And thanks for joining us this week for another episode.
To listen to any past episodes and check out all the resources for today, head to youngandwifedup.com, as well as joining our Facebook group, also called Young and Wifed Up.
I like how we specify. It's all of it is Young and Wifed Up.
Everything that you need to know
is Young and Wifed Up.
Yes.
Also, be sure to subscribe and watch our YouTube channel, also called
Young and Wifed Up.
If you'd like to support us, you can buy us a coffee or a book or whatever at buymeacoffee.com. You can also shop with our sponsors, which include Imperfect Foods,
Covenant Eyes.
I almost said Covenant Hero and Earth Hero.
Covenant Hero and Hero Eyes. Earth Eyes.
Leave a 5-star review with Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen.
Spotify.
Oh yeah, you can rate on or review on Spotify now.
Please do. We want to get on the charts on Spotify.
Yes. And also share with your friends and fam.
Also, thank you so much for 7,000 downloads on our podcast on all of our platforms. We've been so blessed by this community, and we are so excited to continue to make content for you guys. So, how are you doing?
Good. I almost forgot we were going to be like chatting for a second.
You're like, we're done, right?
Yeah. I was like, all right, let's get into our topic.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, no.
What have you been up to? What's going on with you?
I don't know. You know, I wish, because we live so close to each other, I kind of wish the drive was a bit longer so I had more time to think about what I'm going to talk about in our catching up.
Wow. Because it's a 3-minute drive.
3 minutes is not enough time. Yeah, like at this time, we're filming like at 10 o'clock at night at this point. Yeah. And there's nobody on the road, so I don't have enough time. What have I been up to?
Are you playing outside? It's really nice weather.
Yes, this whole week has been super warm.
Yeah.
Low-key kind of hot.
Yeah, low-key kind of anxious.
Kind of not down for it. I'm like, it's only March and it's 85 degrees.
We're getting a little scared. But
apparently next week it's going to be cooling off again, I think.
I hope so.
Yeah, I really hope so, because it's too early to be this warm.
Agree.
We got like maybe 4 or 5 days of really, really nice weather, and then all of a sudden it was like 85 degrees, and I was like, no. It's too soon.
I completely agree with that. So you guys have been enjoying the backyard.
Yep. We've been out there every day.
Even Eli.
He's
Eli.
Running around. He's running. He's rolling around the backyard.
Literally. Doop, 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 doop.
No, I have this like really cute picnic blanket, and I just set it out, and I sit with Eli, and then Seth just like runs around, and
so cute.
Yeah.
I love watching Seth play outside. It's so cute.
He loves being outside.
He comes inside and he's like beet red.
I know. Poor little white boy.
Yeah, serious.
His cheeks are like bright pink.
It's really cute though.
It's not from him being burned though. He just gets flushed really easily. But I'm the same
way.
way.
And sweating.
I know. Yeah.
Poor baby.
Anyway, what about you?
Well, if you're watching the YouTube, you see my cute fit today.
Yeah, it's
nice. Okay, so
except for these are like outer space Birkenstocks. Like,
nobody can see them.
This like gunmetal. If you saw them, they're like these shiny silver.
I have to wear orthopedic shoes because
they're considered orthopedic shoes?
Yeah. My doctor told me to wear these. Yours are fake.
Okay, but
no, they have to be real Birkenstocks.
What makes it orthopedic? If it's
I don't know. Ask my doctor. I don't ask questions. He gave me the list, and I was like, "Yes, sir."
I don't know. These were also very expensive, but they're not Birkenstocks.
What are they?
I don't know.
Huh.
I got them a while ago.
Anyway, yeah. Besides my shoes, which don't go with the fit, but earlier today I was wearing some cute Target sandals. But
yeah.
Anyway, I recently went clothes shopping for the warm weather last week. And Target has some good stuff, like very nice linen skirts, which this one is a linen skirt.
Did they have like a comeback from their Prairie Girl fall?
You know, there
whatever?
is still some Prairie Girl vibes. And
which there's nothing wrong with the Prairie Girl vibes. It's just not our vibe.
Not my vibe. I have
my vibe either.
Quarterback shoulders.
I don't, and it's still not my vibe.
Honestly, I wish I had small shoulders like you, because I might be down with the poofy sleeves. I don't know. But I don't even get a chance to try it because it literally looks ridiculous.
I know. And plus, like, I also think, like, okay, practically with clothing items like that, like, how is this gonna work when I'm cooking and cleaning and like,
that's true,
you know, because like the poofy sleeves get in the way.
So I got a bunch of long skirts that are like really lightweight, and I've been loving them. I cannot deal with jeans during the hot weather. I just cannot. It's miserable. I'm miserable, so then everybody else is miserable. Yikes. And I got these cute ribbed tees from Old Navy, and they're $12, guys. Go to Old Navy.
Yeah, actually, I need to get some.
And they have all kinds of colors, and they have
good basics.
Lots of good basics right now, and they just like released their body equality line, so they have tons of sizes, and including long and tall sizes and petite sizes, just everything, every size in between.
Nice.
Like, so it was really, really nice going and shopping and not having anxiety, because I don't do the mall. No, thank you. I go to Target. I know that
I shop online.
There's clothes for big girls at Target, so I feel safe there.
Yeah.
But everywhere else, like, I refuse to go inside. It feels like a traumatic place for me anytime I go into the mall. But this time I had been seeing on TikTok like that Old Navy has some good stuff right now, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna trust you, TikTok. And
they're cute,
and everything's super cute.
Yeah.
So having like a few skirts and like these tees to rotate, I feel like I have a good spring capsule wardrobe.
Nice.
So anyway, that's what's new with me.
Cool. Anyway,
we have a really very nice conversation to bring you guys today. We had my elder's wife, Idelette, come and talk to us about homeschooling and the Charlotte Mason method, and we were really blessed by this conversation. It gives a good overview of some really good stuff for us to chew on and think about when it comes to home education. So we are going to bring it to you guys right now.
I don't know about you, but I'm always on the hunt for a convenient shopping experience.
However, too much of the stuff we buy today is made without any thought of how it will affect our families and the world tomorrow.
What if there was an all-around better way to shop, with the convenience that we all want and the confidence that everything is made, packaged, and shipped sustainably?
Earth Hero is exactly that. Earth Hero is a one-stop shop for all your sustainable and eco-friendly products.
They have so many products ranging from beauty supplies, cleaning products, homeware, clothing, baby essentials, and so much more.
Join us today on our sustainable journey by using promo code Young and Wifed Up for 10% off your entire purchase.
Make sure to click the Earth Hero link on our website at youngandwifedup.com to start shopping today.
Marcella, guess what?
What?
Last night, I made our dinner entirely out of incredible food that could have been thrown out as waste and headed to the landfill.
No way. How?
Imperfect Foods!
Imperfect Foods is a weekly grocery delivery service on a mission to build a better, less wasteful food system. They offer a full lineup of sustainable, affordable groceries that make the weekly chore of grocery shopping an effortless and delightful experience.
Imperfect Foods partners with food suppliers, farmers, and small businesses to ensure that delicious food goes into our pantries and instead of the landfill.
I feel like you started that sentence really weird.
I did.
Anyway, you guys have got to try it. Get $20 off your first Imperfect Foods delivery by using our link at youngandwifedup.com.
Get it. Hi everybody, welcome back to Young and Wifed Up, and today we are joined with our friend Idelette Lynch. Hi Idelette, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're doing good. It's a little hot in here, but we're going to make it work. So before we get into our topic today, we have some personal questions for you. So the first question is, how long have you and your husband been married?
We have been married for 17 years.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
And you guys have children?
We have one son, Lawrence, and he is 16.
Terrifying.
Yes, hard to imagine, but yeah, 16.
And how long have you homeschooled him?
We actually have homeschooled him from the very beginning. He has never gone to any other school. So.
Wow, that's awesome. So I know you because you are a member at my church, and your husband is an elder at our church. And how long has he been an active elder?
Oh, I think it's probably been about 7 years, maybe a little over that.
Yeah. And you guys are going to be moving soon because he's feeling the call to the ministry.
Yes.
And so we're very sad, but I'm really thankful that we get to have this memory with you and that we can look back on it, because I'm going to miss your physical presence. I know that we'll still be in contact, but definitely going to miss your physical presence.
I agree. Yeah.
So Idelette has been taking care of the young women in our church the past year in instructing us in home education and just kind of giving us some practical ways that we can consider educating our children in the future. And most of the young women, they have young toddlers, and so we're kind of all in this learning phase. And it's kind of exciting because we're learning all these exciting things before we're kind of thrown into the world of homeschooling. And so Marcella and I are really excited to have you on because we have lots of questions. Mm-hmm. And if you guys listen to us regularly, you guys know that Marcella and I were both homeschooled our whole lives as well. And we have an episode on our experience, our personal experience. It's called Unsocialized Homeschoolers. I believe it's episode 22 of...
I have no idea.
Of season 1. I'll link it. I'll link it.
Sounds right.
If you want to hear our personal experience and how we benefited from it and how our mother benefited from it. So our experience definitely shaped our opinions and it definitely motivated us to want to do the same thing with our children. But it's cool because we've been learning this new method of homeschool education.
Well, new to us.
New to us, yeah. New to us.
It's definitely not new.
It's not new. It's tried and true, but new to us. And I think the first time I heard about this method was actually only 2 years ago. And I think it's because when you're in your own little circle of homeschool methods, that's kind of all you really know. Mm-hmm. And then it was being introduced to me that there's these different ways of homeschooling, and it was just really exciting. Like a whole other world had been opened up to me. So we've been going through a book together about it, and we're going to give you guys some recommendations today regarding it, resources on how you can get started. But today Idelette's going to kind of debunk some common issues or roadblocks that women can usually come into when they're first considering homeschooling, and also how it blessed her and her family and why she believes in this specific homeschool method for her family and why she's teaching it to other young women. So with that in mind, Marcella, you have some questions for her.
Okay, so this is just general homeschooling, not necessarily Charlotte Mason specifically.
Okay.
But what made you and your husband choose homeschooling for your family?
Well, from the beginning, when we were first married, we actually really were coming to, the beginning of our family. We knew kind of right away that we looked around at the world and we thought to ourselves, okay, we want to start a family, but what is it that we know about, the teachings of Scripture? As devoted believers, you have to see everything through the lenses of Scripture. Mm-hmm. So as we began discussing having our family and, how we were going to raise our family, we began to think about, okay, well, we know that, Jesus teaches us that, we are not of this world. And, there's a passage in Matthew where he's praying to the Father and he says, I'm praying for those that you have given to me, so the elect, his people. And he says, they are in the world, but they're not of the world. Mm-hmm. And he says they are in me, and they basically are going to face all sorts of scrutiny and all sorts of persecution because they are going to follow the truth. They're going to be who I am. And so that, along with Paul's teaching in Corinthians, where he brings out the same idea, the idea that, we are to be lovers of the truth. And so the world's going to reject that. The world is not lovers of the truth. They are not lovers of the word. And so then you begin to think as your husband and wife, thinking, okay, as the Lord gives us the opportunity to have children, and we are to raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord and His truth and His righteousness, how is it that I can say that I'm going to hand that responsibility over to the world when they don't even know who Christ is?
Yeah.
And certainly there's going to be a lot of animosity. There's going to be a lot of teachings that are completely, antithetical to Scripture. And so really the answer was pretty easy for us. And the answer was, okay, we're going to homeschool. We're going to home educate.
Yeah.
And so that's how we came to that conclusion.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Good points. Okay, next question. What do you believe the benefits are to homeschooling?
Well, there's a lot of them, but I know we're going to get into sort of the philosophical aspects later. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the just the practical aspects. So two of the most practical aspects for us, number one, is that, I have never had to, in all of these 11 years that I've been homeschooling Lawrence, I've never had to sit and wonder, like, okay, where is my child right now? What is he thinking about? What is he being taught that I may have to, unteach him later or counter later, right? Or correct, Or, am I even, I'm somewhere doing something else, and have I even sent him into a safe environment? Is it safe for him spiritually? Is it safe for him physically even?
Yeah.
And, honestly, that's a huge benefit of homeschooling. I don't ever have to think about that.
Yeah.
I know exactly the environment that we have established for him, so that's one big thing. And I think just another really practical benefit for our family has always been that our schedules are all in sync. So, for example, my husband is in law enforcement, and his schedule has been crazy. I mean, for many years, he was working overnights, or, there were times where he has to work holidays, or it's just, kind of crazy, topsy-turvy. We never really took, vacation time during the summer, as a family or anything. We would take it, in the dead of winter or something like that.
Yeah,
but what
we do the same thing.
Yeah, but what's nice about that is that means that when he was ready to have a break, or when, we are ready to spend time together as a family, we can do that because we accommodate our schedule to his schedule. And really it draws us together as a family.
Yeah.
And we have become a close-knit family because of that. And I just think that's a huge benefit. Because there are a lot of families that don't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
nice.
That's awesome.
Okay, what are some common challenges that stop mothers from educating their own children?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this. I know Gabby and I have talked about this in the past, and I think two of them that come to mind, that because I have heard them over and over again, especially talking to young moms. One of them is they look at themselves and they're like, well, you know what? I have a lot of gaps in my own education. And it's like, okay, I know you can do this, but I could never do this. It's like I don't ever feel qualified.
Nice for you.
Yeah,
exactly. Me.
And I've heard that many times.
Yeah.
So I've even heard that from relatives of ours who kind of look at our family situation and they're like, oh yeah, no, I never do that.
Yeah, it's nice it works for you.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just like they don't have that confidence to feel qualified to do it, and they really don't know the route to get there. How do I even get to that point?
Fear of the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of and it's also been sort of instilled in us always that, well, there's a whole professional class of people who are responsible for that. And that's not me. I'm just supposed to send my kids off and somebody else will take care of that.
Yeah.
So I think it's part of that, just getting past that barrier, And then I think another big barrier and another big challenge for some moms, and especially in Christian families too, is that we basically live in a society where, the family structure is very often 2-income households. And, your kids go off to either daycare or to a school environment. And then that just becomes the norm that just gets repeated over and over again, And even in Christian families where, maybe you attend a church where that just is the pattern over and over again.
Wow.
And so you really don't have access to a lot of homeschool families. We've seen that.
Yeah.
And then other times where, there's a lot of pressure from your relatives or from extended family. Even when you decide to homeschool, there's a lot of pressure where you have to say, okay, we are going to be looking different. We are going to be apart from what a lot of families look like, and there is more scrutiny kind of on the homeschool family for that reason. But Yeah, I think those are probably hurdles that a lot of women face.
I think another thing that I'd like you to maybe touch on is some people think that based in where they live, that it would be impossible, like with laws. And I had heard so many times like, oh, you have to be joined to a private school. You have to be joined to an organization in order to do this legally, or that we don't have money for curriculum. Where am I going to get all these resources? We just don't have the money for that, especially if they are one income household and they do have to be more frugal. Then what do you say to those circumstances?
Well, I think definitely, number one, you have to inform yourself. You have to educate yourself. And so the place that I always send people is to the hslda.org website, which is Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I think it's association. And what's great is it's a wonderful resource that breaks down state by state every one of the homeschool laws across the nation, because that's what they do. They advocate for homeschoolers, and they advocate on behalf of them legally oftentimes. And you can become a member with them, and so then they protect you legally.
Okay.
But you don't have to. You could use their resources on the website.
Yeah, for free.
For free. Yeah. And they have a lot of really good things to look
yeah.
at, because you can look up your state. You know, you can look up the state of California or the state of Arkansas or whatever it is and find out exactly what do I need to know in terms of, you know, how do I stay legal in my state for homeschooling? Because, yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions here in California.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people, even my sisters who are homeschoolers, often thought that I had it the worst of all of them. And when we started comparing notes, we realized, wait a minute, actually California doesn't have nearly the same regulations in terms of homeschooling.
They're pretty moderate.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah,
so
that's crazy.
I think it's because a lot of times in California, there's always pushback, and so there's always sorts of legislation that's coming up, you know, and you kind of have to work against it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it rarely passes.
Yeah, the state puts so many regulations on other things. It's like, well, why wouldn't they put it on homeschooling?
That's right.
Yeah, that's a really good resource.
No, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah. So that's one thing, and then you had mentioned
curriculum and the resources being expensive.
Okay, so in terms of curriculum, and we'll get into this later too when we start talking about the Charlotte Mason method, and I have some websites to direct people to. But you know, honestly, your best resource is going to be your library. Wow. I mean, maybe people don't use libraries as much anymore, but they are free. Everybody can get a library card, you know. Your kids are welcome there. And it's just a wonderful place where you can go and find the things that you need, the books that you need to read. And a second fabulous resource is to plug into a local community of homeschoolers, particularly Christian homeschoolers, because so many of them share resources. You know, I have gotten so many books from, you know, my sisters who are ready to hand them down to me, or from other homeschool moms. And there's also purchasing within, you know, the community. So they'll send them off used to you, where you can get a better price for different things. So I think those are fabulous resources. I really don't think that should be an issue, because like you said, no matter what your budget is, you can sit down and prioritize and say, okay, I can only do this much, but what can I do with this much? And actually, you can do a lot.
Right.
So.
No, that's awesome. Very encouraging.
Okay. I think this is the last one before we get into the Charlotte Mason method.
Okay.
How has homeschooling blessed your son, and how has it blessed you?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways. I guess for my son, I would say that he just, especially now when we're looking at him as a 16-year-old, and so he's been through 11 years of homeschooling, he just has developed in so many ways that we're just stunned. You know, it's really neat watching him grow from a little boy into sort of this part man, still part child.
Yeah.
But he's exploring all sorts of different ideas. He's now thinking about his future. And, you know, he loves to discuss everything from theology to football to politics to finance. And it's just neat seeing how all of these things have just burgeoned in his life. And yet he's not a carbon copy of somebody else.
Right.
Or everybody else.
Right.
You know what I mean? The kids that he hangs out with, he's distinct from them.
Yeah.
And there's just something very precious about that. That he has been able to develop who he is. You know, the personality that God has given him. And I really think that that's probably the number one blessing that I see for him.
Yeah.
In terms of myself, again, there's a world of them, but I would say one of the number one blessings has been seeing I am not the same person I was 11 years ago. And I don't think, if I hadn't been a homeschooling mom, and I had taught, 7th grade English for many years prior to having Lawrence, and if I hadn't become a homeschooling mom, there's no way that I would have developed in the ways that I have developed because I have had to self-educate. You know, I have had to read and discuss and meditate on things and really dig in hard to subjects and topics that I normally would not have, you know? And I have been able to expand and grow in a variety of ways and be sanctified in a variety of ways that, you know, I probably would have never been faced with, you know, had I not been homeschooling. So it really is such a blessing that way. You know?
I think two things I want to touch on what you just said. First with Lawrence, because he has been for 5 years?
Yeah, five.
5 years, a student of mine, a piano student of mine. And I've always seen a progression in his development, and I was always very proud of him. He was always stood out as a student for me. But one thing that was like really precious and like sweet, and it was a testimony to you and Larry, is that on the end of last year, at the end of the year, I always have my students, which I think I talked about on the podcast, I always have them self-evaluate how they believe their year went and their goals for the next year. And one of the questions that I asked him was, why do you love playing piano? And one of his answers, he had a couple answers, but one of the answers was, it makes me a well-rounded person. And honestly, I was so stunned by that answer, because usually it's like, because I like music. Because I enjoy.
That's normally what a boy, 16 years old would answer.
But he truly saw it as a part of not just like a skill that he has, but it rounds out his character. It makes him a very specific kind of person, and he enjoys that about himself. So I thought that was really profound, that he was thinking about how learning really does make him a better person. Yes. And that was just very precious to me, because that is a testimony to like the years of teaching and instruction that you had. And with you, I think another blessing, like you've blessed me and the other young women at our church by passing down the heritage. And I think that's such, like you said, like some women don't have access. They don't know that this is an option for them. And that's because they're not exposed to it. Exactly. And me and the other young women at our church have been very blessed with you just okay, we're going to do this together, and I'm going to give you my brain, and we can, Lord willing, pass that on to future generations. And that's beautiful. And so I think that there's so many blessings I see in your guys' family, and it encourages us as well.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that, because that really took me a while to get to that point, because honestly, I feel that way too. I mean, I sympathize with these young women who are looking at it and saying, I don't think I can do this, because I was kind of at that point even before we started our homeschool group, where I'm leading, and I'm just thinking, Lord, I'm sure there's someone far better than me who can do this, So I had to reach that point of conviction too, where it's just like, no.
And it was it's perfect timing. Like the Lord was so kind to you, because it was like a time where our church was growing with young families, and it's just like, it was just perfect timing. Right. Like the Lord definitely ordained that.
Yeah, so true.
So speaking of that class, so I've talked about the Charlotte Mason method a few times on the podcast, and kind of a few things that I was learning along the way, because I was really passionate about it. And I really wanted you to come on, and not just talking about homeschool in general, but something that makes your guys' family different than a lot of other homeschooling families is you guys were committed to this specific method of homeschooling. And so we would love to learn about that today. And obviously this is going to be like the tip of the iceberg, right? Like there are entire podcasts dedicated to the Charlotte Mason method. There are like tons of books and blogs and people that are really experienced and have studied this forever. And so this, again, like Young and Wifed Up, we are a peer-to-peer podcast. We talk with like sisters in Christ. We want to encourage each other to spur on them the faith and to love your families. And so when we are talking about these things or when we bring guests on, we're all learning together. We are not the authority of these topics.
Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason.
You're mine.
Exactly. So this is just a good starting point that maybe some people have never even heard it before and they're homeschooling, or maybe they are curious about homeschooling and this would motivate them that they can do it. Yeah. So how did you learn about the Charlotte Mason method, and when did you start implementing it in your homeschooling?
Okay, so I have actually 3 older sisters, and before I was married, they were already married and started having kids. So I had like 11 nieces and nephews at that time, and they all started homeschooling, and they started talking about, they were going to be doing the Charlotte Mason method. So one of them had heard it from a friend, and they sort of passed it along amongst them. And so I heard little tidbits here and there, and then I saw what they were doing in their homeschools and the different kind of books that they were using, and it struck me as being different, especially with my own classroom experiences with students, and I was very intrigued by it, and I thought, this is pretty cool. And so I just kind of filed it away for a little while, and then after I had Lawrence, I began thinking, wow, I don't know what I'm doing. I got to get started because, he's going to be older before I know it. Yeah. And I don't even know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do this. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to start reading. So, then I checked in with them and I was like, where do I need to start? And so then I started reading her home education series and just really started filling my mind with, where is she coming from? What's the perspective? And what is she trying to, show us here? And so then it just started, things started popping and opening up whole new vistas for me. So, but even actually, we started from the very beginning. We have never done anything else.
Nice. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. So you can give a tried and true. I took from year 1 all the way, and it's about to be year 12.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that's crazy.
It is. And and obviously year 1, I wasn't doing everything. You can imagine what year 1 looks like. You're a fledgling mom and you're just like, is this right? I'm probably ruining my child. I don't know what I'm doing. But you just, keep plugging away. And there's a lot of that through the process, of checking in with other moms and getting on forums and being like, am I doing this right? This doesn't seem right. We're reading a book and then he's going to tell it back to me? Yeah. Are you sure that's education? Is this really what I'm supposed to do?
It's completely contrary to probably what you had been taught, because you were a school educator in a school. Yes. So that's crazy. So you've seen both sides.
Yeah, I really have. And really, one of the main differences, and we'll get into that as we start talking about what her philosophy of education was, but really and we've talked about this in our class, is, as a teacher, I was standing up in front of a classroom of students and I did a lot of blathering at them because you're really taught to, you're the expert and you're going to take the material and enhance it for them and bring it to life for them. No. That's not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so being in the homeschool environment, it was very different. I had to teach myself to shut up. Yeah. Because you're not supposed to get in the way of your child and this literature, or your child and this discipline that he's going to learn. It's his brain that's going to assimilate it. So anyway.
No, I love it. Okay. So we've been talking about this lady. Who is she? Who is Charlotte Mason?
So Charlotte Mason, she was basically an English educator. So she's from England, and she lived from 1842 to 1923. So she was 19th century into the first part of the 20th century, and she was teaching at a time where the Industrial Revolution was in full swing. And so she began as a young teacher, and then she grew to teach other teachers and other parents. But she began to see that the education that was very prominent at that time in England was very much like the factories in this industrial age. So it was like, you know, we're going to do this and this and this, and this is going to be our end product. Just like we're going to take these materials and this, and we're going to come out with a wrench at the end. But all the wrenches should come out and look exactly the same, you know? And so she's looking at the education before her and saying, wait a minute, you can't just pour everything in and come out with this, because children aren't like that.
Yeah.
You know, it shouldn't be like, you know, they come out and be little automatons, you know, because they are persons. They are persons created in God's image. And so she began to think to herself, you know, there's a different philosophy of education that I really want to begin focusing on. And it actually took her whole career, her lifetime of teaching, to really distill these down and to be, you know, for them to be cemented. And she came up with these 20 principles. And her goal was to say, these children are made in the image of God, and the education that they are currently receiving is neither good for them, nor is it honoring to the Lord. And so this is how we need to just, you know, make this change. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what are her 20 principles?
Well, that's a lot. So that's a lot to go through. And of course she has all sorts of nuances and very deep and rewarding things that, you know, you can read about. And, you know, I'll direct people later to that if, you know, if they're interested in that. But I sort of just took the 20 principles and I kind of distilled them down into, 5 here?
Cool.
So I was just going to kind of go through 5 that really encapsulates all of them together.
Perfect.
That makes sense? Okay. So you can feel free to stop me in between.
Cool.
Or ask or do whatever. But, all right, so the first one that I wanted to discuss, and this is, I brought it up earlier, was that children are born persons. And that kind of sounds silly because, okay, we know they're persons, but her purpose in saying that was that, okay, they're not little inferior beings. You know, they are made whole by the Lord, and they're made in the image of their Creator, and so you have to treat them that way. And so, in other words, you can present them with big ideas to grapple with, you know, on their level, and their brains are going to be fed by that. And so that was one of her main things. And again, she really was going against she was really counterculture at that time, which is they're not a sack to be filled. You know, you don't just pour knowledge into them. What she used a lot was the analogy of the body, which needs proper nutrition in order to grow and thrive and flourish. And she said the brain was the same. In order to have a brain that honors the Lord and a mind that honors the Lord, you have to put the proper nutrition in, the proper diet. And so then she went on to describe what that diet was. It was a diet of ideas, and she would call it the feast of ideas. And so that was where she began. Okay, and then she would say that with that proper diet of ideas, just like our bodies have to digest and assimilate the food in order for it to function properly for our bodies, so our mind would have to digest and assimilate that material, whatever was coming in, all these ideas. And so we had to create an environment or an atmosphere by which the children could do that. So she said there were 3 main instruments of education, and they were atmosphere, the discipline of habit, and these are habits of both the mind and the body, and then habit training becomes very significant in her method. And then, of course, the presentation of living ideas, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in some of these other ones. And then she goes on to describe that education is a science of relations. And what she means by that is that children are going to naturally have a relationship with everything they come in contact with. And so her purpose in saying that was, so therefore, bring them into contact with as many wonderful things as they can. So, for example, whether it's being out in nature, whether it's, you know, all sorts of different kinds of mathematics and art and history and whatever it is, living ideas, philosophy, you know, culture, theology, all of these things are part of them making a relationship with the things that God has created, you know, and so that they begin to see where they belong in that, you know, essentially what we would consider the redemptive history, you know, of where we belong as creatures of a triune God, you know, and then let's see. Okay, and then I'll say the last two here that I've kind of compiled, which are pretty significant, is she would talk about, as knowledge is not assimilated until it is reproduced, children should tell back or narrate what they have read or what they have heard. So in other words, and that narration could be something verbal that they say, or it could be something that they've written down. So in other words, if you're taking in the information, then you should be able to tell it back.
Yeah.
And we call that narration or narrating. And that was very, very significant, because what she is saying there is that it's kind of meaningless. If it's just coming in and there's nothing done with it, then they're not making a relationship with it.
Yeah.
And so that's what she meant by that. And then finally, she also she said we allow no separation to grow up between the intellectual and spiritual life of children. So in other words, the fear of the Lord, as we know, is the beginning of knowledge. In other words, there should be no separation between what they are learning and their entire biblical worldview.
Yeah.
So if we know that all knowledge begins and ends with the Lord, then we should see everything through that prism of Scripture. You know, whether it's mathematics or science or, you know, them playing outside, they're able to see this is, you know, this tree that they're climbing, that tree was created for them by the Lord. You know, this is His handiwork. As is true with every discipline that they come across. And so that's a very important thing, because what is their purpose in life? You know, as we teach our little children, well, why did God make you? He made you for His glory, you know? And so how are they going to, you know, flourish and display that image of their Creator, you know, through the gifts that He has given them. And so that was a very important aspect of the education as well. Because really, as you're habit training, you're actually character training, as you brought up before, Gabby.
Yeah. Those are all awesome, and I think you encapsulated the spirit of all of her, because yes, there's a lot of
meat to it. Yes.
Fleshed out.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll have some resources for where you can find those things if you want to read them for yourself. But I think one thing that is very interesting is narration doesn't have to stop when you're done with schooling.
That's right.
And in fact, I think that I've benefited from narration myself now, practicing reading and then telling it, like I just naturally do it, telling my friends and family about what I'm reading. That's writing a book review on Goodreads. All those things are a form of narration. And it's helping you chew on the things that you're reading and you're thinking about it. And even like Marcella, when you're writing your blog posts and stuff, you're basically going off of things that you have been intaking, scripture you've been reading, and your blog posts are a form of narration.
Right.
So it's very interesting that we do it in so many ways,
but we don't realize that's what it is. Yeah.
But it really is like very interesting. Like I saw even in my own teaching, I've been trying to implement a lot of these philosophies in my music teaching, and I've seen just a huge change in my students and my attitude and my students' performance. That wanting them to master something instead of perfecting it, and mastering usually means I want them to be able to explain to me what they're playing, or another way that I've been doing it is I'll play it and they have to correct me if I'm messing up. And that was very interesting to try, you know, trying to come up with ways that we can implement narration or these philosophies to show, like, I'm not expecting you to perform like so-and-so. You're performing as yourself. You're your own person, because you are a whole person. And they're measuring up to their own self. Like, it's not you competing against another child. And I think that that's a huge thing that's very different about Charlotte Mason is it's very flexible, and it's not a competition of like, oh, well, okay, so can you speak to, because you have one child and you brought him through the Charlotte Mason method. What would you say for a family of like 3 children, and they all are different personalities and different people, right? How would you say that we would implement the Charlotte Mason method when we see that each child has different strengths and weaknesses?
I would say that it's like anything else. You're going to accommodate for whatever that child's specific needs are. So for example, say you have a child who's an avid reader and has no problems, reading and then coming and telling you, oh yeah, this is what I just read, and does it very well. You may have another child who struggles with reading a bit and then doesn't want to do that narration because it's hard, or because maybe they didn't understand or they weren't invested in the reading that they were doing. And I think that's why when you start out with the Charlotte Mason method, you are reading everything aloud to your child. So you're very much participating together, and then they are telling it back to you.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's a good thing. Like, you can make an accommodation, for example, of that one child who's not such an avid reader. You can continue to read aloud later than the one who might be ready to read independently.
Right.
And so you can continue reading aloud maybe with the, 7 and 8 year old, but maybe the one who he was 8 years old and ready to go on his own, but that's okay. You're still reading aloud and you can work on it together. Yeah. Because maybe that child isn't ready yet, to take it on for himself or herself. So I think there are natural accommodations that you're going to make as you progress through it. Yeah. And I think that is part of growing in wisdom as a mom and as a teacher. Mm-hmm. You're always approaching it with the humility of, these kids are entrusted to me, and every day, Lord, I'm going to come before you and ask for that wisdom. And honestly, sometimes you're going to hit stumbling blocks, and then you need to go ask for help, and you need to, you know what I mean? And you need to find other moms who have struggled the same way, or might be able to offer some advice or some insight into it. And that's natural too. And that's a good thing. It keeps us in community, and it really does allow us to, encourage one another and, keep moving forward. We keep moving forward together.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so.
What do you think practically people would think is very different or interesting about the Charlotte Mason practically, like day to day, than a traditional homeschooling?
Well, I think one of the things is because when we would get together with other homeschoolers, we saw right away there were a lot of things. For example, we never had workbooks or busy work. We barely did anything like that. I mean, math. When we did math, obviously you're doing, problems and multiplication and things like that on paper. But most of it from our early elementary years, we were reading and telling back or narrating. Mm-hmm. We were outside. We were doing nature journals, things like that. We weren't sitting in workbooks, drawing a line from here to here, or, you know what I mean, doing things like that. So often Lawrence was like, Mom, where's my workbook? Or when he would be with other homeschoolers for a while, and I was like, yeah, honey, we don't have that. We don't. Let's go to our nature journal. Let's go draw those birds outside.
That's so funny.
So you begin to see like some of the differences, because we also weren't reading in textbooks. We were reading what Charlotte Mason calls living books.
Right.
In other words, we were reading things that. She talks about the literary form and how natural it is for a child to hear and to love it, be attracted to it because of the form that it's in. And that, and we did that for, in your early elementary years, we were reading biographies about scientists and how...
That's really cool.
Yeah, how they did their different experiments, or, how Benjamin Franklin... invented different things and stuff like that. That's what we were reading about. We weren't like in the textbooks.
Right. You weren't doing like memorization of vocabulary and definitions and the formulas and everything like that.
And then sometimes you do stop and you take a step back and you're just like, wait, this is so very different.
Yeah, you're like, is this
work? He really? Yeah, is this work? Because that's often what it was, and then often we were not doing like 8-hour days. Right. In early elementary years, he was outside most of the time.
Yeah.
You know, he's out on his scooter, or you know, he would ask for like, you know, could he have a sandwich outside and go by the trees, or you know, just stuff like that. Yeah. Which is what she encourages to do. You know, she encourages for the first 5 years of your life, be outside. You know, explore creation and get out as much as you can. And
okay, that's one thing I want you to talk about really quick. Early childhood education.
Yes.
So why does Charlotte Mason, and some people are probably hearing for the first time this, why does she say to delay the formal schooling until at least 6?
Well, primarily because you are doing more than just filling a vessel with knowledge. You are character training. In other words, you are presenting this child with what it is to be an image bearer of Christ. And what better way to do that than to say, okay, here's what God created. He has created everything for us to see and experience, and all of our senses can experience. Let's go experience it. And really, what she begins to say is that, you know, if you're outside and you're climbing a tree, and you know, you start deciphering, oh, this tree has different leaves than this tree has. And what she says is the child, even at these young ages, is taking in all of this information. Now, whether or not he's going to be analyzing at this point, maybe not. But eventually, all of this, the mind is going to assimilate. And then later on, as he comes to his formal education, he will have already been intaking for 5-6 years just a ton of knowledge. And the mind that God has given him is going to allow him to, okay, now I'm going to make connections.
Yes.
You know, now I'm going to see, oh, that's why, you know, when he starts learning the formal scientific method and things like that. Oh, and he's already had, you know, his observatory experience and his tactile experience with that.
Yeah.
So it really is important. And honestly, if you know kids who have not spent time outside, you can tell the difference.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to children who grow up outside. And I think even within our generations, I think, you know, my generation was probably outside all the time.
Yeah.
We were always outside. And then progressively the generations have come inside.
Yeah, we've turned into the tablet generation.
Like for us, I mean, I remember the majority of our childhood was outside probably, besides doing, because we didn't do Charlotte Mason method.
Right.
But I mean, our schoolwork took hardly any time during the day.
Rest of the time
and then my mom would be like, all right,
go
out in the backyard. We had our huge backyard and everything.
Mine did too. Like, you're outside now, go.
Yeah.
But that's great.
But even it's interesting, like losing, like going outside, all those things, it sparks their imagination.
Yes.
And when you're inside with screens all day long from the age of 2 and all that, like, where is you're not cultivating a place for them to use an imagination and to work that muscle.
No, that's right. You're actually stifling them, right? Because you're absolutely right. There's no feast of ideas there.
Right.
You know, it's somebody else's mind, or, you know, something that they have created put in front of the child.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's not an idea that leaves them thinking beyond that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or coming back to it over and over again to mull it over.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting too, like we're even seeing it in Marsala's older son Seth, who's 2. Like, he's already made connections with sounds. Like, we've talked about so much in class, like that when they're in in the little years, they're using their senses, right? That's how they're learning, is by hearing and seeing and feeling, and how he already has made distinctions in all the noises around their home. He knows when he hears a mower, a motorcycle, a car. He even knows whose car is coming.
Really? That's awesome.
You know? And it's like, nobody had to tell, like, we probably one time had to say, oh, that's a mower. And now it's like, mower. Right, he's like, that's a mower. And he's always hearing it. And it's
he doesn't watch shows about lawnmowers.
Right.
There you go. That's perfect.
It's it's like bringing them, like, back in touch with what reality is. And that's outside
their environment.
Yeah, that's a great point.
No, that's awesome. Okay, so we talked about a little bit of the practical ways that and the philosophies of the Charlotte Mason method. So what do you think the benefits of using the Charlotte Mason method are in contrast to other maybe more traditional homeschooling methods?
Well, I think we've touched on some of them, and really, I mean, what do you want your child to be at the end of the education? You know what I mean? Do you want him to just be filled with knowledge, or do you want that knowledge to mean something? Do you want him to care? Like, I was so blessed when you said, Lawrence had said, I want to be a well-rounded person, and so I love that music is part of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that, that sort of stuns you, even though I know him.
Right.
It's like, that's really, it's like, it's all coming together now. So, and really that is the Charlotte Mason method right there, So, and I think another huge thing, and we've talked about this before, is that this method, because you are character training, I'm not concerned about, does he know absolutely everything there is to know about World War II? Or does he know a small piece of it really, really well?
Right.
And then he has a lifetime where he's going to discover more pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah.
So, and yet he still has been able to ruminate on some of those ideas. He has a knowledge of where it fits into a historical timeline, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And it, as long as we know that we are presupposing Christ in everything that we are teaching, to me that is the most valuable thing. Because that's what I want to see for my child. That's the most important thing to me. I want to see him grow up as a man after God's own heart.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And that's ultimately, like, do we want extremely intelligent children that can recite all kinds of very impressive things, or do we want a child that is, like you said, like, well-rounded and loves God and serves the people of God well? And because ultimately these children are going to become adults, and so when they're entrusted to us, and even the small amount of time I get with my students, there's a lot of weight in the things and how we're teaching them, how we're approaching them, and how we treat them with respect and dignity. And I love that that's another emphasis that she has, is to respect the child, not to embarrass or humiliate the child, or to talk down to them, or use like baby talk, like they like, you wouldn't get this, you know what I mean, or using, or silly, like foolish books and foolish TV and foolish things, like they can only handle these foolish baby things, you know what I mean? Like it's just so interesting, like hearing the contrast of a biblical worldview and how we can implement that into educating children, and the world's view, which is we want basically children that can recite everything that we've taught them. You know what I mean?
That's true. And also, I mean, even just touching on that in terms of the amount of knowledge that you may end up having, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. In other words, you could have a student who just excels in everything and just is fantastic, in across the disciplines, and just has a wealth of knowledge about everything. Yeah. And that's great too. If that's what the Lord has given him as his gifts, that's fabulous. Yeah. But then it also doesn't exclude every other child. Right. Every child can thrive in his or her own way,
Yeah, and I totally love that. Totally love that. Okay, so what if somebody's listening and they say, wow, all of these things sound really good, but I want to dabble. I want to dabble in a bunch of other types of methods. Yeah. And how could I implement some of the Charlotte Mason principles into a broader scope of homeschooling?
Well, I actually think that's pretty easy, because if you just think about some of the things that we have said here right now, we've talked about narrating. So we've talked about reading and telling back what you've read, or writing about what you've read. That's pretty simple in any kind of curriculum.
Yeah.
You know, and it's very beneficial. And I think part of it is just practice it and see. You know, you can see for yourself whether it's beneficial or not.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is probably the idea of, you know, like when we talked about habit training, that was very important to Charlotte Mason. I mean, think about that. Even if you just go and read some of what she said about how to habit train, these are things that are going to be important for a lifelong, you know, person. I mean, we do this. My husband and I, you know, talk about the way that we're going to take on new habits and change what we're doing, and you know, and so Charlotte Mason has become very much a part of our family too. Yeah. And we do the same thing with the narrating.
Yeah.
That's how I learn now.
Yeah.
You know, that's how we do.
It.
He narrates to me the stuff he's learning, and I tell him that all the time, and he's in seminary. So I'm like, okay, don't leave me out, because then I'm going to feel like I'm way back here and you're going to do all this stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I'm like, tell me what you're learning, and then he always wants to know all about what we're doing in school and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I think those are pretty easy and practical things that somebody can do, and just see for yourself, you know?
Yeah.
If it works.
Yeah, it's been really fun, even though, like, I don't have children of my own that I'm educating, like, taking some things that we're learning in class and that I'm reading, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to try that with my student this week. And it's so fun, like, it's almost like experimenting, because, I mean, because I'm the only teacher in the room and I can kind of make those decisions, it's fun to kind of say, okay, that didn't work with that student, but it really worked with this one.
Yes.
And that's just so exciting. Especially, it motivates me as a teacher to have something new and fresh to think about and try. So even if you are just a teacher at a school, because I know we do have some listeners that are school teachers, like even thinking about how you can implement that into your classroom.
Yeah, right.
I mean, because didn't Charlotte Mason start off training other teachers in schools?
Absolutely. In fact, I will even say this, is that she was single her whole life.
Yeah.
She wasn't married, and she didn't have children. So think about the impact that the Lord allowed her life to have on others.
Yeah, that's
you know,
so
she
cool.
poured her whole life into this, and just had an amazing, I mean, even now, you know, this generation of women and across the world really that are using this curriculum and this method, I should say. And it's pretty amazing, you know, the kind of impact that she has had. So
looking back, so you've done 11 years of Charlotte Mason method with Lawrence. Can you look back and say, like, this has truly blessed my family, I wouldn't have done it any other way? Or do you have regrets? Do you wish you would have tried something different? Like, what do you think about those things?
Oh, no. I really don't think. I don't look back and say, oh, I wish I had tried something different. I look back and say, I wish I had been more attentive to the method at the beginning. I wish I had implemented it maybe more quickly, with more wisdom. You know, you're always going to look back and say, oh, and
there are different.
Yes, exactly. Or even there are some years where, you know, you do kind of get off. I remember one year in particular where we got off track because we weren't doing what I knew we should be doing.
Right.
You know, I wasn't doing it the way I needed to be doing it, and I sort of just let it slide that direction.
Yeah.
And things happen and circumstances come up, and then you just have to restart, you know, and you have to say, okay, that's it. We went off track, but now we're going to restart. Thank God we're able to do that.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, no, I wouldn't say I ever had a regret about choosing this method, because even from the very beginning, we were just so amazed at, like you're talking about with, you know, your nephew and your son, just the connections that they make and just the way that their brain seems to go off on all cylinders. And you're just like, wow, this is stunning. So this is, you know, she really knew, she observed and saw and really understood the nature of children.
Yeah.
You know, and these things do truly draw out who they are meant to be.
Yeah.
You know, so that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. And I like the biggest thing that I really like about her method is that every child can thrive, like you said, through it, despite their weaknesses or their strengths, and that a family that can have multiple children can do it, and it's not like they're tied to one thing and now we have to change everything for this particular child, because you can make the modifications that you need to make. You're free to do that. You're not chained to this system that you committed yourself to. And so I think that, I really hope that people listening, if you haven't already been thinking about this, that you guys would read the books that we're going to talk about at the end. So what are the resources that you can give us today? Where should we get started?
Okay, so I think you should get started. I will tell you, I'm going to plug Brandy Wenzel right off the bat. She is a mom, a homeschooling mom, and just an amazing woman. Very intelligent, just very warm and loving woman who has compiled so many things, and she does a blog called the Afterthoughts blog, and her website is afterthoughtsblog.net, and it's just a tremendous resource. I can't talk it up enough. But at her website, you'll be able to see a lot of materials about getting started with the Charlotte Mason method.
Cool.
In fact, if you go to her shop section at her site, she actually has a book entitled Start Here. And what it does is it goes through the 20 principles that we've been talking about tonight.
You can't get any clearer than that.
No, and it's a way for you to do it. It even goes through talking about how to do it by yourself or how to do it with a group. Nice. So it's really cool. Yeah. And she has, and it's it's digital material, so it's very inexpensive. Just per download, it's very inexpensive.
Okay, so it's like an ebook?
Yeah, it's an ebook, and then you could buy it for yourself. You could have a few friends along, find a friend who is willing to work with you. In fact, she even says in the introduction, pray for a friend to come and do it with you, or to, read it with you, and you guys can be in it together. And then what's great about it is that it has all the links right there. So you can go to all the links of the Charlotte Mason material that she wants you to read and think through, and the different articles from other homeschooling moms, Charlotte Mason moms, and such. So definitely that's a good place to start. And then of course that is exactly where we got our material from for our homeschooling group. It's very similar, just a little bit different for the home education series that we've been going through. And then another one that I'm going to plug absolutely is the curriculum that we've used. Now curriculum is simply the nature of the books that you're going to use and how you're going to use them as you go through this method. Okay, so she's going to tell you the philosophy of education under Charlotte Mason, and then, but how do I get started with it? How do I actually implement that in my homeschool?
Yeah. So
we have used this from the beginning as well. This is amblesideonline.org, and it's AMBLESIDONLINE.org. And basically, Ambleside was the name of the community in England, the region in England where Charlotte Mason was from. So that's why it's called that. So if you go there, it's invaluable.
I get lost. I literally can spend hours on that site. There's so much stuff, and it's all good. Right.
Oh, you totally lose time going there. So basically, what it starts out with, it goes from year 0 to year 12. And it shows you in every year what the different book lists would be. In other words, what books should your child be reading at this time? And then it breaks down for you, well, how do you go about doing this? And it actually schedules it out for you too. In other words, how many pages do you read per day? What do you do with this, and so on. And it's really amazing how these moms have been working on this for 20 to 30 years and compiling this, and it's all free. So
that's the best.
It is the best. And in fact, they've been very sensitive about, because homeschooling moms, like you said, we've talked about this, are often one-income families, or they're, your young families starting out, and, how do you think about investing this money in this education? And they say on there, okay, well, if you absolutely can't do all of this, then here's the essentials. And so it kind of breaks it down for you to see, okay, well, at least get these. And then they have a forum there at that site where you can get into the forum, and there's a broad range of topics. And you can really get in there and see, okay, well, what did people use? If they couldn't get a hold of this, what did they use? What were the alternatives? Where are people finding these resources? Does anybody have this for sale? Yeah. This is an older book. A lot of times these are older, very tried and true classics.
Yeah.
That you may not be able to get a hold of, but I've often found if you can't get it from, somebody that you know, Amazon sells a lot of these as used books.
Yeah.
I've even come across them at used bookstores. Library sales are another great way to come across.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, these kinds of things. And then once you get familiar with what a living book is, as you get into the curriculum a little bit, you can start making substitutions and say, okay, well, I can't find this one, but this one has the same feel. It's the same, it's also a living book, and I can use that.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, those are two awesome resources, the afterthoughtsblog.net and amblesideonline.org.
Awesome.
I would encourage.
And what about some books for somebody to read, like extracurricular books, like that they want to get to know the Charlotte Mason method a little bit more?
I would say there's one by Karen Glass, and it's actually one I'm going to pass on to you. But it's Karen Glass, and it's called Consider This.
Okay.
And it actually shows how the Charlotte Mason method intersects with the classical education method. So I thought you might be interested in that. And actually others might be interested in that too as well.
Cool.
And then of course, For the Children's Sake, and I think
I read it.
Passed on to you
Loved
guys?
it.
Okay.
Loved it.
Oh, it was is it Susan McCauley?
Susan
Schaefer McCauley.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's another really good resource
that one
just
sold
to get
me.
started. Yeah.
Literally just reading that book sold me on everything. I was like, yep, I'm a believer.
I know. So those are two big ones, and they're very classic in the Charlotte Mason realm to get familiar with.
We'll make sure to link all those in our show notes.
That'd be great.
Cool. Okay, Marcella, can you ask our final question before we hear Idelette's recommendations for us today?
Okay. What is something you wish you knew about homeschooling as a young mother that you know now?
Okay, so I wish that I knew, you don't really realize when you start out that education is a life. It's like, I often joked with people during the pandemic when everybody was locked down.
Yeah.
And they were all like, we can't stand this, we're stir crazy, we gotta get out, we gotta, and I'm just like, okay, well, this is just normal for us. We're not, we were not in a panic, we were just like, our life just continued. We were like, okay, it's fine. All right, we can't go outside our home. Oh well, whatever. So, but when you get started with it, it is kind of sort of like, okay, the pandemic is here. Because it's suddenly like, okay, we're living in our home, we're educating at home, so basically we're working at home, we're eating at home, we're socializing at home, we're offering hospitality at home, and it's just kind of like, oh my goodness, what do we do now? And then you finally realize, like, it took me several years as I got into it because I really thought, oh no, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, for example, Lawrence had to do a narration. He had just read something, and maybe you're like, oh no, something has come up. Maybe somebody is ill and you need to go do something. You need to serve them in some way. And you're just like, can I do that? Can I do both of these things at once? And then you're just like, okay, sit down. Can you peel those carrots for me, Lawrence? Because narrate to me what you just read in Robinson Crusoe, and I'll be making the soup over here. You know what I mean? And that's what it is. I mean, it is a life.
It's life. Yeah.
It's okay. And that's okay. And I think as a young homeschooling mom, you're always like, I'm shortchanging my child by doing this, but you're not. You're not. And these things are coming up, and he's learning to serve. He's seeing how things work within a Christian community.
The home economy
happening.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's education.
It all is.
He's learning and assimilating. It's all education. That's right. Or, the relative shows up and you're not expecting them to come, or they tell you like 2 days in advance, oh, we're going to be staying with you for a few days. And you're just like, oh, what? Yeah. I mean, it's like, here's your schedule, and then suddenly it's like, they're slammed into it.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, well, we're going to go visit some museum in Los Angeles. Well, this is history for today, that kind of stuff.
That is kind of like what ended up happening a lot for us too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. All the field trips and everything.
Everything was a field trip.
Yeah. Disneyland.
Well, honestly, there are those things that get rolled into the homeschool life that you just can't help. What are you going to do?
I love it. That's awesome. Okay, so do you have some hacks for us, Idelette?
Okay. I don't know if this is really a hack. Maybe I'm just Maybe I'm just slow. I don't know, but it took me a while to get to this point. But I just realized, with the homeschool life and, everything that goes on during your day and, being a wife and being a mom, I finally discovered that I always have to, have something in my hand. Okay, you were just talking earlier in the evening about, I had a kid in my hand, and while this hand was free, right? So I was like, okay, so even without a kid in your hand, I finally came to the realization that I should never be empty-handed, ever. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if I'm cooking, I'm also cleaning. That's when I'm doing my dishes. If something's on the stove, I'm doing my dishes.
Yeah.
Or I have a cloth in my hand because I need to dust something. Because if I let something get out of hand, in other words, if the chaos begins to build and the laundry begins to build and everything, then all serenity is lost.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to get to that point, but I think that's a great hack, is that you have to, if you get up to go to the bathroom, you go and put that cup up by the sink, or you pick up those shoes and you put them somewhere where they need to go, or wherever. You should just always be picking up and doing.
Yeah.
Those hands keep going, and then it just becomes routine. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't feel like such an overwhelming thing.
Yeah.
And then you can actually feel good about, when your husband comes home, you're actually want to spend family time together.
Yeah.
You're not looking around and being like,
it's like a tornado.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just one thing.
I love that. That is honestly, that's really good advice.
Good.
Never have your hands empty.
That's right.
That's awesome. Well, Idelette, thank you so much for spending this time for us, and we benefited from this conversation, and I know that other women that are going to listen to are also going to benefit, so thank you.
That's so great. Thank you, guys.
Okay, guys, well, thank you for joining us today, and please head to our show notes for all the incredible resources that we're going to be linking, and we hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Bye!
Bye.